Right. Oh, we're supposed to do it. Right. I'm supposed to play a video. Unfortunately, I can't. Can you hear me, Naveed?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear
So
you.
I'm just going to play you. Can you just apologise for the technicalities?
Yeah.
And mention. You try and play. I'll try and. Well, I won't be able to get the video up and play.
Well, we can put the video with the link up afterwards, can't we? Yeah, that should be fine. Yeah. Okay, so let me know when you want me to start, Sam.
Right. Right. I can't talk to you, so you're going to have to leave the full meeting and tell people. Let's have a look. So I'm going to go off microphone. Wait a minute. Right, we're going live now.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Feversham Primary Academy to the T4 World Education Week event. First of all, I'd like to apologize for the delay. We've had a few technical issues this morning. Hopefully those are in the process of being resolved. But in the meantime, we are joined by Duncan McRail, apologies. Duncan, thank you for joining us this morning. I'll just do a brief introduction and hopefully Nicola Benedetti will be joining us as well. Oh, morning, Nicola. Morning, Nicola.
Good morning.
Well,
how are you?
Very well. We've just had a few technical issues, but hopefully those are solved now. So yeah, it's been a bit manic this morning. So thank you to everybody for their patience as well for the technical issues. So what we'll do is I'll do the introductions and then we'll go straight into the discussion. So I'll just introduce Duncan first. Duncan will be sharing his research from the University of Sussex, highlighting many of the structural barriers to music programs developing in schools in the UK, many of which are global issues, such as a narrow STEM-based curriculum and accountability measures, which devalue music and arts education and lead to huge problems in children's music learning. So we're also joined by Nicola Benedetti, who needs no introduction, but I will just give a brief introduction anyway. So Nikki is a Grammy Award-winning violinist whose keen interest in music education saw her set up the Benedetti Foundation, which really gained prominence in recent months for providing a smorgasbord of online musical learning, which proved invaluable to thousands of families during the COVID-19 breakdown. And we're also joined by Jimmy Rotherham, who is our Feversham Primary Music Lead, and he's also a Global Teacher Prize shortlisted for music with the Waki Foundation, and he'll be sharing some of his approaches to classroom music, top tips, and where to learn more. So before we begin the discussion, just a little bit about Feversham. About 7 years ago, we were in special measures. The morale was low, the kids hated learning, and we were pretty much at the bottom of every league table, and learning wasn't really happening. So we decided then to make music as a foundational element of our pedagogy. And since then, our results have gone up, the children are learning better, and the staff are engaged much more. So one of the things that we have been championing over the last 5 years is that actually music education isn't just an add-on to the curriculum, it's actually a core element. And this core element will lead to greater results in every way. So both emotionally, well-being wise, academically, socially. So these are music really is a fundamental tool. And one of the things that we need to tackle and address is this idea of you have core subjects and you have foundation subjects, where music and other subjects are regarded as secondary subjects, foundation subjects, and the core subjects are English and maths. Well, this is a little bit of a misnomer, because music actually is a core element of learning. And what music does is it allows children to connect to something higher, something deeper, and that allows them to focus on the learning, behavior, and also the transferable skills. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that. later on in the program. So I'd like to begin with Nikki first. Let's move on to the discussion. So Nikki, I was really impressed with some of the work that your foundation has done during the COVID-19 period, and it's refreshing that, you know, at a time when music is being squeezed out of all the recovery curriculums, that your foundation has provided a fantastic resource for anybody who wants to do that. So tell me a little bit more about the inspiration and the motivation behind that.
I was muted. Sorry. Thank you so much.
Well,
thank you for having me, first of all. And it's so inspiring and wonderful to be part of a conversation with people that are thick inside the mainstream education world, but that understand and appreciate and want to celebrate and expand the power of music within schools. It's just the kind of conversations both Laura Gardner, who runs the foundation, and myself wish we were having every single day. So it's wonderful to be invited into this environment. It's definitely true that after the initial shock of lockdown and us having many large-scale workshops cancelled, where we were getting together hundreds and hundreds of young people from all different walks of life, but also different levels of music participation. Some of them have never done anything more than bang a drum and create some rhythm, and some of course have are proficient on instruments, but when we saw that that was going to be cancelled, it took us a couple of weeks to regroup and then address how are we going to make something possible for people. We were of course getting so many messages from people saying they were heartbroken that the workshops were being cancelled and what could we do. And so we set about to do what we always knew was going to be an inevitable, important way of communication for us, which is create a sense of community, uplift, excitement, and togetherness about music, but do it through a screen. And it was almost like something that we had imagined would be a kind of 2 or 3 year process. We tried to make happen within 6 weeks. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that both myself and Laura did not sleep for about 2 months, and we and when we the structure of the workshop was a 3-week structure that led to a final performance, and that final performance was in the form of a 1 hour long film, which tried to represent it's on our YouTube and Facebook channels. It's just called, I think, the Final Celebration Concert. But the idea of it was to show that we had 66 countries from around the world. We'd had over 7,000 participants. We had this kind of amazing just force of people getting together, and that was something that people could kind of celebrate, but it was also really important for us to I mean, I'll never forget when that concert finished. I think that the tears that came out of me were tears like I have never experienced in my life before. I mean, just such unbelievable emotion. And I think that's one of the points that I want to really get across today, is the notion that through a screen can't allow for the energetic connection between people to be felt, I think is an untruth. You know, I think that actually for us going forward, a really equal attention to, of course, activity that gets people in a room at one time, so having hundreds of people making music in that place at that time, that is obviously, we're desperate to get back to that moment when we can do that. But equally, we are going to be focusing so much energy on the highest possible level digital learning, distance learning, learning that does not require people to have to go through the logistics of getting to a certain place, or having, you know, all of those kind of equity issues that you so often have when it comes to getting people to join in on something. We surpass all of that, and so our future really looks to combine digital with in-person learning.
I mean, just to share some of my experience during lockdown, and we've had to move towards digital learning as a school. And you're absolutely right. We've underestimated the power of digital to connect people, to promote learning, and to make sure that actually it's accessible. And actually, digital learning is really accessible to anybody, so there is no issue of in terms of equity or getting to the venues or transport. And what we found is actually some of our children actually learn better through this way than even through face-to-face physical learning. So I mean, I can completely echo what you're saying in terms of there is a massive potential of digital learning which needs to be exploited now, and it needs to become the norm, really. And there's no barriers. I mean, you mentioned you had 66 countries from around the world. That would, organizing that physically would have been an absolute mammoth of a logistical nightmare. But online, you guys might obviously it would still have been difficult, but you guys managed to do that really, really successfully. Now, I just wanted to ask a question, Nicola, in terms of follow up to some of your comments.
Yeah.
What kind of take up has there been from schools as opposed to individuals who are interested in music? Or groups who are interested in music? I mean, how much influence can we have on a system level in terms of structures and school systems?
This is definitely an area that we don't feel we've done enough in, and we don't feel 100% confident in. We work with a team of general musicianship specialists whose daily bread is to go into schools and work with classes, but I think partially it's probably an issue of my like the connotations with me being a violinist, and also so many of our workshops they focus on, and the imagery of it is mass string playing, and I think because of that we tend to get naturally pulled more in that direction. But make no mistake that our absolute focus in terms of the likelihood and effectiveness of actually reaching every child in the UK, for example. Obviously, we want to reach every child in the world eventually, but let's say start with the UK.
Absolutely.
The general musicianship fundamentals of music, how to address rhythm, how to address melody, how to address communication, how to address storytelling, how to address color and thoughts and all the invisible parts of life. We feel that there's so much more that we can do to support the people doing that work to the highest level. And of course, the first name that comes to everybody's mind is of course Jimmy Rotherham, who's done such an incredible amount of work, and what he's put together during the COVID period has been phenomenal. So I'm being totally honest with our position with that. We're desperate to do more, to collaborate more, to bring what we feel our expertise are and sort of merge together as much as possible. Jimmy knows that that's our view towards it and our feeling towards it. So there's a lot more that we can do to help that.
I mean, one of the things that I've found is coming back after lockdown, there is a big focus on the recovery curriculum, and it's been interpreted as basically filling in gaps in English and maths. And it's been narrowly interpreted across many schools that kids have missed out 6 months of English and maths. So one of the things that Jimmy and I have been looking at is actually, why are we squeezing the curriculum? There's an assumption here, like I said at the start, that the only learning that matters is just your learning in English and maths. And I'd like to bring in Duncan here, if I may. Duncan, in terms of your experience, how much of a barrier is it in schools where the focus is purely on your STEM subjects and EBAC subjects, and this split between the foundation subjects, and how much of that is a barrier for children accessing the arts and music in schools?
Well, absolutely, it is, and I'm going to pull some of those things together in the presentation that I'm going to say. But it's very much down to the individual school, as you know. You have some fantastic work going on with some fantastic heads who see the curriculum as something that needs to be balanced. And of course, English, maths, and science are important. Of course they are. but that's part of a balanced curriculum, and you don't have to get rid of art subjects as well. They can enhance, just as you've done at Feversham. So I'll pull some of those things together in my presentation, if that's all right.
No, that's absolutely fine. So Duncan, thank you for adding that comment. We'll come to your presentation in a moment. So Nikki, can I thank you for joining us this morning? And I know you need to go. So Nicola, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I wish your foundation all the success. And I think the work you've started is an absolute privilege to be part of through Jimmy, part of that work. And I think the organizations, foundations like yourself will have a big impact on the system. We just need to keep on going and keep getting the message out there. So Nicola, thank you very much. So Duncan, we'll move on to yourself. And do you want to start your presentation first, and then we have questions afterwards?
Yes, please. That'd be great.
Over to you then, Duncan.
Just looking for my presentation. Which we've just tested and is, here we go, right. Okay, you should now have my screen at last. So my presentation, and firstly, I just want to thank Nikki very much for sharing what the Foundation's been doing. It's really encouraging and fantastic, the work that you're doing, and also Feversham. But my presentation is highlighting some of the changes and barriers to music education in schools. And so hence I've taken some lyrics from Joni Mitchell's Big Yellow Taxi for my title, because I've got the bad news, really, and I am concerned about the future. Firstly, as we have an international audience, I thought it might be just useful to briefly go over the structure of the national curriculum for music in England. So from its first version in the 1980s, it's been about more than performing and listening. It also includes composing and improvising, and creativity is at the heart of it. And I see this as a real strength. And in many respects, this is somewhat different from other countries. So the diagram here shows how music education is organized in schools. So there are 3 key stages from the age of 5 until 14, where there is a statutory requirement for music as a curriculum subject for all. Then at the age of 14, it becomes optional. And then on the right, we have additional music making opportunities that are not necessarily free and all in school, but which supplement the school offer. So thinking about our research that we did at Sussex, so we carried out research into changes in the music curriculum provision in secondary schools. And this included both state and independent or private schools in 2016, and then again in 2018. So for that first period, we looked back from 2012 until 2016, and we had 705 responses. And for the second, in the period 2016 to 18, we had 464. Now, our research was based in secondary, but there are implications and parallels for primary. And my co-researcher at Sussex, Dr. Ali Daubney, and I really want to acknowledge her contribution to the work in this presentation. And our Sussex University research also forms part of the State of the Nation report, which you can access there if you wish to later on. I'll put the link up later. Now, government support appears to be strong. Boris Johnson, our current Prime Minister, but when he was the Mayor of London, he said in 2014, music isn't a nice to have, it's an essential part of every child's education. The fact that the national curriculum guarantees children 10 years of unbroken musical learning in our schools is something to be enormously proud of. And then in 2018, Nick Gibb, the Minister for Schools, said creative subjects are compulsory in our school system from 5 to 14, and it's an entitlement after the age of 14. If you want to take those subjects, you're entitled to take them. That all sounds good, but 72% of secondary schools are now academies and therefore do not have to follow the national curriculum. And so that means that even those that are still supposed to follow the curriculum have not always kept music as a subject through years 7 to 9. Schools are also allowed to cut the 3-year Key Stage 3 down to 2 years. And in some schools, music is taught in a carousel. So the little image I've got at the bottom of the screen, you can see there on this carousel system, music's taught in the spring term in year 7 and the summer term in year 8. That's not a sustained music curriculum offer. You know, how can you learn to play some things in the classroom and then have 3 terms off and then come back to it? So there's some real problems and a real decrease in teaching time that's been going on in secondary schools. One of the main factors for the diminishing importance in music is the EBAC. Now, the EBAC is a school performance measure which excludes the arts. But once pupils have taken their required EBAC subjects, which are English, maths, sciences, geography or history, and a language, in some schools they only have one free option subject available. So often there is realistically only the opportunity to select one art subject at best. This is one of the most important drivers for the changes in music provision. However, consistently, as you can see, only about 38% have been entered for the EBAC, and the success rate has actually gone down. So we can see it's actually a failing policy. Yet schools are judged by the EBAC and another performance measure, Progress 8, which also disadvantages the arts subjects. Consequently, it's not surprising that secondary schools feel pressure to focus on what's being judged by the government and the Inspectorate of Schools, OFSTED. Now, there are similar drivers at primary, namely standardized assessment tests, SATs, which once again don't include music. So having briefly set this context, let's look at some of the music teacher responses to our research. So we asked about changes, both positive and negative, following the introduction of the EBAC. And it seems, as you can see here, that music teachers aren't very positive about this. 1.9% positive. That's pretty well negligible, isn't it? So I'm just showing here the teachers that undertook both surveys in 2016 and 18. So we can see it's the same teachers and that actually their responses have changed even within that period. And you can see that it's worsened a little, with negative responses increasing and a drop in the neutral and positive responses. So music teachers aren't in favour of this. Looking at year 9, where music up to a few years ago was compulsory in all state schools, for the first time in 2018 to 19, more schools reported year 9 music being optional than compulsory, despite those promises of government ministers, the Mayor of London and the national curriculum. And some unintended consequences of government and school changes are highlighted here. For these teachers, it resulted in fewer students having instrumental or singing lessons, for GCSE music being removed, for art subjects being in competition with one another, and at best, the opportunity to choose just one art subject if they're lucky at Key Stage 4. Moving on to teachers, 35% of schools reported a fall in staffing levels between 2016 and 18, and professional isolation, where you have single-person departments, is becoming an increasing problem. More frequently, staff are not being replaced when they leave or they retire, and the wider life of the school is also negatively impacted as that workforce reduces. 2 examples are given here for the erosion of extracurricular music. Here you can see a new head teacher cancelled lunchtime rehearsals, so that means there's a significant reduction in time for ensembles. Secondly, additional catch-up sessions or revision sessions or support sessions for EBAC subjects are being put on in many schools at lunchtime or after school. That again reduces those opportunities for students to engage in ensembles and music making. Instrumental lessons are offered in almost all schools, but this is not the same as curriculum music. Darren Henley, in his report for the government on music education in England, identified in 2011 that without the obligation for music lessons to be part of the school curriculum, there's a real concern that the subject might well wither away in many schools, and in the worst case scenario, could all but disappear in others. Music's actually the fastest disappearing A-level subject. Entries have dropped by 38% since 2010. And this has implications for undergraduate courses and conservatoires. So my concerns echo that Joni Mitchell lyric of "you don't know what you've got till it's gone." But let's look at something a little bit more positive and see some things that schools can do. So these teachers believe that it's about making music fundamental and clearly visible and audible in school, and who would disagree? But these things require commitment and they require staffing. And this is even more a challenge with the COVID-19 restrictions. And I'm happy to talk about that, but a couple of ideas and things later. So you can see these teachers are saying make music the hub of the school, make sure music's in every newsletter, offer as much extracurricular opportunities as possible. And in this school, which was in a city, they recruited nearly 50% of their current year 7 to take instrumental lessons by really being proactive and raising the profile of music. Primary liaison considered really important as well in creating that musical culture. And here we've got examples of multiple stakeholders who are involved to promote music, so that the school are working with their music service, their music hub and local groups to promote music in the community. And they have the advantage also of vocal parents that would support their provision. Working with multiple stakeholders is good to do. So to finish with, I've got a few key issues and a summary. So firstly, the EBAC at secondary and SATs at primary, as well as the confidence to teach music amongst primary teachers, which is an ongoing problem, and other factors are having a negative impact on music within and beyond the curriculum. Schools understandably are going to focus on what's being measured. Secondly, some students have no access to music throughout Key Stage 3, and others have a reduced or sometimes unsustained curriculum experience. Thirdly, falling numbers of students taking and able to take Key Stage 4 music qualifications is a problem. Fourthly, in our 2016 research, we found a relationship between schools with high pupil premium numbers, that's students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and decreasing Key Stage 4 curriculum time for music. Hence, it's really a postcode lottery of music provision, where those who can get music, and those disadvantaged children have less provision and more adverse impact. And then lastly, a diminishing number of music teachers, both existing and those trained, has significant implications for the future. We need continuing professional development, particularly to support primary teachers to feel confident to teach music. Well, I'm going to stop there.
Okay, thank you, Dr. That was a very succinct summary of your report. And I just want to pick out a couple of questions, if I may, from that.
Sure.
You know, one of the issues that you've identified is that some of the structural systems that are in place, like the EBAC and the SATs in primary, are hindering the development of music or the expansion of music, or even the existence of music in primary in schools. My question was that the new national curriculum that came out in 2013, the 13-14 iteration, is there any kind of flexibility or maneuverability within that, so within the existing constraints for schools to kind of promote music? And the reason why I'm asking this is because we had a interesting discussion with OFSTED. We were part of a case study for the new framework. And one of the things that they said to us is that they said, you know, you are proof that the system works. And it just made me think that actually you know, some extent, yes, that's true, because we are working within the current constraints. But on the other hand, there are severe constraints where if you get it wrong, that the system doesn't. So I wonder what your thoughts are. Is the system itself a hindrance, or is it other factors as well?
I think the national curriculum is fine. That's fine. That's not the problem. The problem is, as you've rightly identified there, that I think head teachers and senior leadership teams feel under pressure to do what they're being measured against, or what they perceive they're being measured against. And I think the problem Ofsted have is they have said in the last sort of 18 months that a balanced curriculum is important. That's great, good, hooray. But they've also said, we're going to judge you on how well you're meeting the EBAC and Progress 8 and your SATs. So we've got this mixed message. And until we really get to see how that new framework works and see, are they really looking at the importance of a balanced curriculum, then I think we have a problem. Now, we have some heads, both at primary and secondary, who are going, I'm going to do what's really important, what I believe in, and we will move ahead and we will make arts have a balanced place in our schools. But there are others that feel under pressure, I think particularly those perhaps in disadvantaged backgrounds where their results aren't perhaps so good as well. They feel that pressure to do things. So until we get the messages right from government and Ofsted, I think we have a problem. But the curriculum itself, I don't think is the issue.
Because one of the things that you're absolutely right, the curriculum framework is actually liberated us to focus on different areas.
Yeah.
But I mean, I speak to a lot of heads, and we've been trying to encourage the schools to adopt this arts focus approach. And I've yet to meet a head teacher who doesn't believe in this. But like you've said, the stakes are too high if you get it wrong. So if your results don't go up, and then you know the whole system descends with its might upon you. So I think the issue here is trying to find a support network for teachers that can help them work through this without feeling the sense of, well, if it goes wrong and I can't, then my results go down, what's going to happen? So that's one element. And the other thing that I kind of picked up from your response is that there's also a body of work to be done with the mindset of some head teachers, in the sense that the curriculum isn't just English and maths. It is also going to actually, like we've demonstrated at Feversham, that actually music enhances academic results as well. So I think this myth that's out there needs challenging at one level. So I agree with you completely that the goalposts by the government haven't changed. So we've said the same things. Okay, the wider curriculum is there. It's enshrined in the new OFSTED framework, but the goalposts, what we're going to measure you on, are still the same. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And secondly, then it's what can we do as well. So as heads, I think we should be creating networks of schools that can support other heads to say, okay, what is the process in your school to help you 2-3 year plan to look at your finances, your structures, your staffing, how we can have a 3-year plan before you can implement it without the risk involved. And the third element is tackling teacher attitudes and teacher assumptions about music and the arts. So, for example, in a lot of schools, even in our school, it was the same. Music and arts are seen as a reward. It's like, you do something really good, and you can do a bit of music. Well, actually, that's totally missing the point, and that's enshrined through our teacher training approach. Where if you look at teacher training, if you're lucky, you'll get about half a day or a day of music.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you expected to teach in a primary, you expected to teach music to a really high standard. Well, that's impossible.
Yeah. So one of the things that we could do there, I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, it can be as little as 2 hours in a PGCE to train somebody to teach music at primary. How can you do that? That's completely unrealistic. But the teacher training agency from many years ago did fund universities to do additional 2-week programs just focusing on music, and that worked really well. And we've got some good evidence from across different universities of where actually then generalist primary teachers really felt much more confident about teaching music in the classroom, and that would have a transformative effect. And I think that put into the newly qualified teacher year, or the newly qualified teacher plus 1 year, that could be really, really helpful.
I mean, one of the models that we adopted was taking on a part-time specialist, such as Jimmy, and what Jimmy does, for example, and Jimmy will come in a moment. What Jimmy does, actually, he provides weekly CPD to teachers. So when they're planning in their PPA time, we plan as a whole staff. So Jimmy's there, so they're getting weekly input, and I think that model is a lot cheaper. You know, if you look at the amount of money that's gone into music hubs, and it'd have been cheaper to get a 2-day part-time teacher in every school who's there, who works along with the teachers, the coaches, models. And I think there's something to be said about how the money, because if you speak to Nick Gibb, they'll say, we've spent so much money, we're throwing money at the arts, yeah? We're throwing money at music. But the question is, why isn't that impact filtering down at a school level? And yet, some of the music clubs are doing fantastic work, but it's an add-on to doing performances, not to the main curriculum in school. I don't know what your thoughts are on that particular point.
I agree. If we could, well, we can clone you and Jimmy and then put them around to support schools to see how music can be embedded in your curriculum and support all the other subjects, so you can have it all. You can have it all. You've proven that. Yeah. And that would be really good. But obviously we can't clone you. And so my thought was, we did our CPD, continuing professional development program, with our trainees at the end of the course, just for 2 weeks there. The students, the trainee teachers, have got some time then. That worked well. That's one module. There are different ways of doing it. Of course there are. But we need to be investing in primary schools and music, so that, because that has a continuing impact throughout children's.
I think there's another element here, like I mentioned, about the way music funding filters down into the system. A lot of that is going towards music hubs doing instrumental lessons, but very little of that is linked with actually developing music expertise of teachers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you look at the millions that have been spent, and like a 2-day a week part-time music teacher isn't expensive, and the amount of money that's been spent, it'd have been much cheaper and more effective to set aside some of that money to say, okay, we're going to guarantee every primary or teacher school for a 2-day part-time teacher. And I think at that systemic level, a discussion needs to be had about how effective. At the moment, there is a standard way of thinking about music funding, and that's just the way we've been doing it for the last 10 years. It's the same we're going to be doing for the next 10 years. And yes, it's achieved a lot. It's we get performances, and some of our kids learn instrumentals. They get half a day a week for a term, but it's not dealing with the issue that you've identified in terms of the capacity and the expertise in schools that's being part of your research, is that all that's disappearing. And I think that is something as a model we should be pushing towards. So Duncan, I'm conscious of the time, so I'm just going to finish off with one last question to you. If you had a magic wand, one thing that you could change in terms of policy that would make the biggest difference, what would it be?
I'd get rid of the EBAC. Actually, I think that would have a EBAC and Progress 8, so that we can ensure that we're focusing on a balanced curriculum. I think that would have a significant effect.
Fantastic, Duncan. Thank you. So, Duncan, thank you. Just stay if you can on the line. Jimmy, are you with us?
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, Jimmy. So, Jimmy, I'd like to bring Jimmy in. So, this is the mastermind behind music at Feversham. So, Jimmy, over to you, sir.
Thank you. So, Yeah, so at Feversham, our music programs are based on the singing-based approach of Zoltan Kodály and the movement-based approach of Jacques Dalcroze. And what I'm going to do now is just take you through some of the key principles of the approaches and some practical tips on some of the sort of things you can do if you're not sure how to deliver music or the best ways of delivering it. So for teachers like me who follow a Kodály approach, singing is at the center of everything, and it's an incredibly powerful phenomenon. It's on a well-being level, it releases dopamine and serotonin in the brain. This lowers stress. It can even give us a better night's sleep. It also releases oxytocin, which is perhaps overhyped a little bit, but it's a new neurotransmitter which builds strong social bonds. And this is also strengthened by the fact that when we sing, it's a very personal thing. And in bearing our souls to others, we strengthen trust and social ties. So it's very powerful. And one of the reasons why before lockdown, choirs were really growing in popularity amongst adults. But there's also strong teaching reasons, pedagogical reasons for singing being the starting point, because by internalizing the sound, which is also known as audiation or inner hearing, we actually develop the skills necessary for reading, for pitch matching, for internalizing rhythms, for rehearsing silently. And without this inner hearing or thinking voice, as it's sometimes known, we would never be aware of more than one sound at a time. We would never be able to make the oral visual connection between the symbols of notation and how they should sound. And this often leads to very mechanical reading and playing. Zoltan Kodály said, as Duncan just said as well, musicianship training should start in the early years, because this is where it can last for a lifetime, and these positive musical experiences can last for the child's entire life. Lots of people regret on their deathbed not learning an instrument. Do we, as professional teachers, want to be responsible for that, or do we want to make a difference so that that's not happening to our children? But there's also powerful language reasons. At Feversham, 98% of our children do not speak English as a first language. So developing their language and their oracy is vitally important. A lot of research shows that music and language are processed in many similar parts of the brain. And as well as that, learning the language through singing can help with memorization of vocabulary. Language and music are both based on elements of sound, and they're organized into highly structured and also culturally specific sequences. So, for example, we can compare phonemes, sentences, speeches, novels. We can compare those to tone, to phrasing, to musical pieces, to large structures such as symphonies. There's a lot of similarities. Both take place in time. Thus, they require very continuous, sustained attention and memory. Also, a good understanding of meter and how and time signatures and how that works. That can really help with our understanding of poetry. For example, understanding the rhythm of compound time, that sort of skipping time signature. That's the rhythm of Shakespeare's poetry. It's iambic pentameter. It really helps us with understanding language in this rich way. And both language and music are universal human phenomena that they develop naturally in infants, but they do require hundreds of hours of training in order to achieve literacy. And we wouldn't achieve literacy in reading through doing it for 20 minutes on a Friday as a reward, as you've said. And obviously another advantage of singing is that it's cheap as chips. It's affordable to all schools. Everyone can start doing it tomorrow. You don't need loads of equipment. Music doesn't need to be a hugely expensive thing for your school. It can be done in the right way and in a very cost-effective manner. So the first principle is singing being at the heart. The second principle is learning through play, because children learn fantastically well through play. And there's a bit of a misconception that learning through play means they won't actually do any learning. They'll just kind of have a mess around and a bit of fun. But Zoltan Kodály said that music education should always be a joyful experience. It should never be a torture. This idea of kind of furiously practicing and discipline and it being a miserable experience until you can play that right note. Lots of us have had negative musical education experiences where the teacher will say to us, that wasn't good enough, play it again, and all the children are getting fed up. We've just sang this song 20 times, why do we need to sing it again? But actually, if it's play-based learning, you can cover the same material, and children will sing a song 25 times, and they'll be saying, please can we do it again, because they want to play the game. And also, so it kind of reverses that dynamic of the teacher asking the children to do it again and again. And there's different ways we can play. We can play in a free and child-led manner, or we can play in a very structured way. For example, using specific movements to reinforce the understanding of music theory, which makes it not only fun, but also based on concrete experience. And there's all sorts of advantages. So one is that if children are focused on a game, they're not self-conscious about their singing while they play. They're often not even thinking about their singing. And this can lead to a really confident and natural singing style. So the second one is learning through play. The third tip is learning through movement, and this is where the Dalcroze approach, which we combine with the singing-based approach of Kadai, this is where this can be really powerful. So it leads to a very strong embodied sense of rhythm and embodied cognition of concepts. It really helps through the movement with the nuances of expression and phrasing and all these sort of things. And it can really unlock improvisation skills in children and really build the confidence in that area. Also, it builds bodily awareness. So with very young children, when they just see, they understand that they don't just have an arm, they have a hand, they have an elbow, they have wrists, and how they can move them. So it's incredibly good for developing motor coordination, gross and fine motor coordination. It's very good for posture, for technique, for coordination, and for balance. And also it can really liven up listening activities. Often you see teachers teaching a listen activity where children listen and then they write down answers to the questions. How about they embody those sounds, they express them through movement? It's incredibly powerful. So we also have, learning through movement. The fourth principle is the 3 Ps, and this is incredibly powerful. It's a pedagogical approach where with each new concept, we prepare it, we present it, and then we practice it. Often that first stage is missing through music education. So your music teacher will give you a sheet of music. You have to then go back and painstakingly decode it all. And then the teacher points out all your mistakes. Whereas if we use the 3 Ps, we're ensuring deep learning and understanding of concepts through sequential scaffolded learning. And this can also apply to other subjects as well. So the preparation stage, it's experiential, it's based on the familiar. And then when we introduce a new element, to those that children are already comfortable with, they'll absorb this new concept unconsciously, and actually they'll already have a good practical understanding in the concrete world of experience before we introduce them to the unfamiliar, abstract and theoretical conceptualization of music notation, for example. And an example is for teaching semiquavers over several weeks. Children would hear it, they would play games, they would move to it, they would learn songs with semiquavers without naming them or seeing them. They would possibly recognize that there's a new rhythm, that it's different to the rhythms they're already familiar with. And then when that happens, we can move on to the presentation stage, where we add rhythm syllables, which are another incredibly powerful tool of the approach, and very simplified versions of what they look like. So if I can just present very quickly, I can show you. So we may be presented with something like this, which looks incredibly daunting. Even for many musicians, this will look daunting, but that's what music appears like to people, this incredibly complicated, massive symbols. Even a very simple thing, this is Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but even as something as simple as that is not a beginner piece. That is not where we would start with beginners. What's that squiggly thing on the left-hand side? What does the 2 4s mean? Why have we got so many lines? Why do the notes look different? It's not a beginner piece. A beginner piece would be something like this. You can clearly see we've got the high note on one line, the low note on one line. And what we've done is we've taken away all that extraneous information, and we're going to introduce it bit bit by bit. I've just been told I'm not actually presenting anything. I'm not sure why. But yeah, it's the idea of, rather than presenting everything at once, we make it very simple, and we just present on two notes on 2 lines, and we build it up from there. So principle 4 is that we simplify things and we scaffold things carefully. But this prepare, present, practice, it can work on several strands at the same time. So you might be reinforcing one concept whilst introducing another one. It works on the long term. So children in year 1 will be preparing some things they might not even do till year 5. They'll be preparing things they're going to do next week. But it can also work on the very short term. So there'll be one activity might prepare skills that you need for the very next activity that you're going to do in the lesson. So it works on the micro and the macro, and it can work with simultaneous strands of learning. So it builds a very, very powerful sequenced, scaffolded system of learning music. And a key principle of this is that we have sound before symbols. So children learn the sound first, and often the sound can disappear from music, and it's actually, we can forget that it's the most important aspect of music is how it sounds, not how it looks. And we need to understand how it sounds and make that connection to the notation. Another big issue in primary schools is the use of developmentally appropriate materials. So can children comfortably sing a song at the pitch from the recording you're using or from your demonstration? A lot of nursery rhymes in particular can be very difficult for children to sing, very much beyond their range. Children often have quite a small range, and so we need to look at what children can do and build it up from there, rather than asking them to run before they can walk. So that's another principle. The next principle is that only the best is good enough for a child, and we have a duty to provide the best education we can for these children. I am running out of time. I just wanted to share with you, if you want to know more about these kind of techniques, there's a couple of things I wanted to show everybody. So the first thing is that if you go to the Benedetti Foundation website, you will be able to find, or you can look at our Twitter account, Feversham Primary's Twitter account, and you'll find I'm doing a session actually this Tuesday where I will go into much more detail about how we can teach when we have COVID restrictions, because we're in a position where a lot of schools are not allowed to sing, they're not allowed to share instruments, they're not allowed to do many of the things that we did rely on as fundamentals for teaching music. So we will be able to go through some of those issues with you. Please get in touch with the school. We're really keen to help other schools and do everything we can to get more music in more schools. So please get in touch with us. Join us on Tuesday with the Benedetti Foundation for our mini session, where we'll be going through some of this pedagogy in more depth, and also how it can be applied to the COVID classroom, where restrictions are in place, which is actually stopping a lot of schools from feeling confident in teaching music. So we're here to help. Please get in touch with us, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jimmy. That was absolutely fantastic. That's okay, Jimmy, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. And I can vouch for everything Jimmy has done. Just one quick comment: the pedagogy that Jimmy talked about, the 3 Ps, or unconscious learning, conscious learning, practice, we have embedded that across the curriculum in every subject, and that has seen great results. So music pedagogy is actually a great tool for raising standards.
A good example, Naveed, is when we look at algebra and we use fruit. A lot of teachers do this. They use fruit, don't they, to teach algebra. And we know that 2 bananas plus 2 apples doesn't equal 4 bananas, don't we? And if we can learn it in that practical way first, in that experiential way, then the numbers are not abstract, they're not intimidating, and it just makes the whole process a lot easier.
So this was, again, one of the key points I want to get across, is that music pedagogy and music actually is a core element of raising standards, not just raising standards for pupil well-being, of mental health as well, which is something we haven't touched upon today, but it's such a fundamental ingredient of mental well-being and pupil happiness, the arts are absolutely essential for that. Okay, I've been told we're running out of time. So what I want to do is, we've had a couple of questions in. We'll take one question. And Duncan, this question is probably more for you. The question is, how can we integrate music into secondary schools?
Yeah, that's quite a challenge. I mean, because we've seen less cross-curricular work going on in the last few years in quite a number of schools. But I think Jimmy talked about singing. You know, singing's so important at primary, but it's also important in normal times anyway, in secondary as well. So using singing, it depends whether we're talking about English language in this country or whether we're talking, this might be somebody from abroad and is talking about how we teach English in a secondary school. And I think if it's the latter, then certainly using songs can be really valuable and good for helping that to develop. If it's in this country, then I think talking to your music department and establishing some projects you can do together, whether that's writing songs, with English doing the lyrics and music doing the musical bit, whether it's about writing adverts and doing media or writing film music and things like that. There's lots of collaborative things that you can do together that will enhance both subjects.
Brilliant. Thank you, Duncan. Okay, it remains for me to thank all our guests today. Thank you, Duncan. Thank you, Jimmy. And thank you, Nikki, as well, for joining us. And I'm going to leave you with just one thought, and that is that actually music connects to something deeper within the human soul. And that depth then allows children to learn and to flourish in every possible way. If you want to find out more about Feversham or other schools that are promoting a schools-rich approach, there is the RSA last year produced a report, the Royal Society of Arts on arts-rich schools, which is available online, and there are cases of primary and secondary schools in there of how to integrate music into your schools. So thank you to T4 for organizing the World Education Week event and bringing the whole world community together and focusing on what really matters. It's the higher things in life, such as the arts, which lay the foundations for a good and happy life. So thank you all very much. And if you do want any more information, you can go on the T4 website. The link will be to the broadcast will be there. Feversham website's available, and Duncan, your University of Sussex is available as well. So thank you all very much, and thank you for listening. Take care. Bye. Ah.